Members, before I give the call to the Honourable Neil Thomson, I remind members that this is the member's first speech. The Honourable Neil Thomson.
Thank you, President. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, the elders past and present. I also acknowledge the Aboriginal people of different nations across Western Australia, many of whom I've worked with and have developed close relationships. Like others in this House, I am a migrant arriving from New Zealand 37 years ago. I'm a proud Australian, living the affirmation I took when I became a citizen in the late 1980s. I was born in a small town of Apotiki in New Zealand, which is located on the North Island's east coast, where I lived until my family moved to the regional city of Gisborne. Those early days involved plenty of fishing, camping, and as I matured, a love for mountains. Winter was especially important. Have I spent too many years of my university days on the slopes of Mount Ruapehu skiing, with my friends hiking the high peaks of the Ruahine and Tararua ranges. It seemed normal that after I'd finalised my study at Massey University, armed with a Bachelor of Agricultural Science, that I would work for a period of time as a shepherd, with working dogs in tow, on Earnslaw Station in New Zealand's Southern Alps. It was there I saved to pay for travel to Africa and Asia and Australia. If you've watched the cinematic version of Lord of the Rings, then you'll be familiar with Earnslaw Station and the location of my shepherd's quarters. These were later to become the site of the Wizard's Tower and the Orcs' Lair, with additional CGI. To this day, I struggle to imagine the Tolkien series as they should be, rather than thinking of the settings that I've walked and each peak I've climbed. I was part of a family of 5 children. My dad was a country police officer who worked in inquiries and youth aid. My mum was an artist and business person, owning and managing florist shops when she was young, and landscape paintings, using those paintings to further subsidise household expenses. I am grateful for the artistic talent, some of which has brushed off on me a little. Some of my earliest memories include travelling with Dad in his personal car. There were no patrol cars in Apotiki in those days, and when he did his inquiries, we visited Maori families along the rugged east coast of New Zealand, where I was plied with copious amounts of tea and biscuits as Dad listened intently to Maori concerns. My dad passed in February last year. He was deeply committed to his faith, as is my mother, with a theme of redemption always being at the forefront of their way of being. This theme also guides me. Dad's parents were Finnish migrants to New Zealand in the early part of the 20th century, and to this day we continue to have contacts with our family in Finland. Hanging on the wall of my mother's house is a painting depicting a scene of the snow-covered forests of Finland, a gift of gratitude for the many food parcels my grandmother sent from New Zealand during World War II and afterwards during the recovery. I am told that the painting is on the very canvas that wrapped the food parcels, such a potent symbol of how resilient people can repurpose hardship into art and create a symbol of family bonds. As we have heard in this place through inaugural speeches, family narratives are important. It's our history, it's our truth. Mine is no different. Even my name, Thomson, is a relatively recent invention. My grandparents adopted it in order to fit into New Zealand society, Granddad's surname being Koskinen. To me, it epitomises the era, the opportunity and desire to fit into something new. That was the story of thousands across the globe. The story of migration continues with, we hope, greater acceptance and diversity. As families have their stories, so do nations, the importance of which resonates with our First Nations people as they find their voice in truth-telling. And as we listen and engage, we become closer to healing and understanding, especially in this week dedicated to reconciliation. I would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge my friend Dr. Robert Isaacs, who lives with his wife Teresa a few blocks away from where my wife Deborah and I live in Broome. He lives and breathes the story of reconciliation, faith, perseverance and acceptance. I first met Robert through my role as Executive Director for the Aboriginal Lands Trust. He was the chair. Robert would jokingly address me as the Honourable Neil Thomson. Robert, I don't know what you knew, but your prediction has been realised. Like Robert, my father identified his natural family later in life. Unlike Robert, my father was adopted as a child. It was not until in his 50s that he learned of the details of his biological family, both Pakeha and Maori across New Zealand. As Dad grew older, he found tremendous comfort in engaging with both sides of a massively enlarged family, with numerous brothers and sisters he didn't know he had earlier in life. It was his Maori brothers who said to him there's no such thing as a half-brother in Maori culture, and they embraced him as one of his own. Deborah and I have adopted this approach to our blended family. We have 8 children between us, and it is rapidly growing with the next generation, a family I'm very proud of. We love them all and we do our best to be there for them no matter what the circumstance. My mother's story comes through colonial Australia with a history of hard-working Irish and English ancestors. In fact, my great-great-grandfather, Walter Bailey, arrived in Fremantle in 1851, and he went on to build roads in and around Perth. So it seems fitting acknowledgement to my ancestors that my first job in Western Australia in 1985 was in road construction, operating a front-end loader and a bulldozer on the Newman Port Hedland highway just south of Mungina Gorge. It was in 1988 that I began my career in the Western Australian Public Service, based here in Perth. We bought our first home, our second and our third as our family expanded, settling in the brand new suburb of Allenbrook in 1998, where I became involved in so many community-based activities supporting my kids as they grew up. In the early days, there was nowhere in Allenbrook to get music lessons or be involved in art. Along with a few locals, I joined with the effort to establish a music academy and a painters group. I acknowledge the many hard-working pioneers of Allenbrook, including the former Allenbrook RSL President, Brian Dillon, Councillor Paddy William-Jones, an inspiration to thousands of young people, and the former Labor member, Joe Radisich, who sadly passed away in 2012. I also acknowledge the developers of Allenbrook LWP Property, who were exemplary in supporting the community groups. To this day, they continue to support the Allenbrook Cultural Foundation, an organisation which I was a founding board member. I'm proud to have 3 adult children, 3 adult daughters, shall I say, the youngest being a commercial skipper off the Kimberley coast, another who is a social worker and the mother of 2 wonderful boys, and the third a full-time mother with 4 beautiful and high-achieving children. My 2 sons work in the mining and exploration sector in the mining and pastoral region. Deborah's 3 sons came into my life as adults. They now work in the defence industries and the oil and gas sector, and the bond with them rounds out our very large family. Deborah and I acknowledge and appreciate the devotion of those who have co-parented with us, recognising the challenges for all parents who juggle co-parenting responsibilities. Over the last 4 years, my wife Deborah and I have operated an economics consultancy based in Broome. We work across the Kimberley on projects delivering for Aboriginal corporations, local governments, state agencies and the private sector. We have met some incredible people in that role, people who fight tirelessly for economic prosperity in our region. People like Shirley Brown from the remote community of Mullen, and former ALT board members like Preston Thomas from Kampa in the Ninanjara lands, Patrick Green from Fitzroy Crossing, and Jamie Elliott from the East Kimberley. I enjoy working with them on so many projects, and most of all, I am the beneficiary of their friendship. I've seen the frustration of Aboriginal clients who have battled red tape and the challenges of engaging with our bureaucracy as they try to achieve their aspirations for a stronger community. Land is central to the culture of Aboriginal people. Our land tenure arrangements and our bureaucracy are often too impermeable to enable the economic activity, home ownership, prosperity and cultural security we need to deliver, both for Aboriginal people and the broader community. This needs to change. I've had the opportunity to develop business cases and advocate for funding for road infrastructure and important social projects through our role in local government. I cannot say strongly enough that it is unacceptable that many thousands of people who live in the remotest parts of our state have regular periods of isolation and constant danger on our dirt roads and as a feature of their lives. We are yet to make sufficient investment to ensure infrastructure is safe and resilient all year. This is a priority issue for me. It is vital that we see our regions prosper, see our kids educated and provide pathways into fulfilling and meaningful work and a meaningful life. Opportunities in our resources sector, the defence industries, tourism and the services sector provide opportunities for the next generation, and I trust will continue to do so into the future. I have a vested interest in the future of this state, and this country, as my family, has their future deeply etched into its fortunes. The challenges we face with increasing societal dysfunction, rising crime and antisocial behaviour, these need to be addressed by the state. We can become so easily desensitised to the ongoing crime and wanting destruction in our communities. But this has a corrosive effect on the trust that people have for each other and the confidence we bring to our society. Drug addiction, petrol sniffing, alcoholism are just the tip of the iceberg of dysfunction. The despair and neglect, domestic violence, child abuse can only be addressed when there is a grassroots approach coupled with a strong response to law enforcement and justice. There needs to be positive pathways to recovery focused on education and learning to respect each other. I appreciate the opportunities both education and training provide, as they have been a gateway to a better life. Without education, my life would have been less interesting, less satisfying and less prosperous. I've listened to the representatives of business in our regional chambers of commerce as they despair of the shortage of job-ready young people. But on the other hand, I've also experienced firsthand the challenges of young people trying to break into the workforce at the end of their training or schooling. We need to find more creative solutions to enable the connection between education and training into work to be strengthened and optimised. Whilst tertiary qualified, my first role in the public sector was as a Level 1 field officer in 1988, undertaking field trials on behalf of the Department of Agriculture. We are fortunate to have some of the finest researchers and academics across the field of agriculture and other sciences. Our world-class botanical diversity is still to be understood in the development of new fodders, foods, nutraceuticals and medicines. And this is particularly important as if we develop the Northern Australia and expand our existing pastoral farming system and our nascent irrigated agricultural sector. Our natural world is becoming an increasingly important focus as we tackle the challenges of climate change, oceanic pollution and the pressures on our natural habitats. We must continue to invest strongly in R&D and take advantage of our natural resources in a responsible way, including investing in our people to enhance their expertise. It was a commitment by the Department of Agriculture to excellence in research that provided me an opportunity to complete studies at the University of Western Australia, gaining a master's degree in science, agriculture, majoring in agricultural economics. In 1997, I was transferred to the Department of Treasury, ultimately leading efforts, in competition policy and microeconomic reform. It was federal Labor under Paul Keating who introduced competition reforms which were progressed by the Liberal Howard and Costello partnership. This economic reform played a key role in creating our unprecedented prosperity, with the longest stretch of continuous economic growth of any OECD country prior to the COVID pandemic. I am committed to promoting a market economy, coupled with sensible laws and processes that enable fairness, accountability and predictability. Creating this environment enables businesses to make investment decisions with confidence that their risk assessments are predictable and they are likely to be rewarded for their hard work and investment. For that reason, we should attempt to the greatest degree possible to ensure our laws are properly defined and can be managed efficiently. If we don't have incentive in our society, we have failure. The strength of the Liberal Party is that we have fought to maintain incentive, contextualised within a fair and progressive tax system that involves a reasonable redistribution where it is needed. The system must be sufficiently beneficial to promote one of the most basic instincts of the human condition, which is to get up every morning and go and do a solid day's work, to put capital on the line, whether it's human capital or in the form of physical effort, intellectual endeavour, artistic creativity, or to risk financial assets, investing to gain reward. The unprecedented growth in Australia is no more felt than in the Pilbara, where we see huge opportunities. These opportunities come with community pressures. I acknowledge the incredible work of the Barnett Grills Partnership, which transforms towns like Karratha and Port Hedland through the Royalties for Regions program. But there's still so much more to do in building our key regional centres, starting with ensuring there's adequate housing and services to promote a vibrant residential community. The ongoing challenges of the interface of industry and our residential areas in towns such as Port Hedland are also needed to be addressed, and done so fairly. Whilst FIFO has been essential in our state, there is no substitute to long-term residential populations in our towns. This generates a strong small business sector, which supports our volunteers who are so vital for our communities. I see the impact of FIFO firsthand on my hometown of Broome, where business owners disproportionately are represented in the army of volunteers and sporting clubs, marine rescue, volunteer fire brigades and the SES. With its huge resources wealth, Western Australia is well positioned for the future, but we must diversify our economy if we are to withstand the potential global shocks that from emerging international belligerents, the evolving pandemic and environmental threats. Even the risks associated with emerging technologies are tangible, and these should be considered carefully to ensure a fair and equitable society is maintained into the future. We are also well positioned as a future energy superpower with ample sunlight and massive potential oil and gas reserves where they enable our transition to the new energy economy over the coming decades. Our iron ore industry will need to diversify with the production of green steel with sustainable energy and obvious opportunity. Legislators around the world will increasingly grapple with the full impact of these emergent technologies on our social and environmental well-being. We must promote technology but understand its impact. It should be managed and understood. And this is also true for our social media. Whilst the issue was short-lived, the enormous power of Facebook was on display in their deeply disturbing action, which saw many of our community services pages shut down and our state opposition's leader page cut off just weeks before a state election. As Assistant Director General for the Department of Planning, I was responsible for the information technology effort and observed with some disappointment the inefficiency of our data procedural management systems. I am an advocate for greater transparency and permeability in decision-making processes, and technology can be a key to achieving this. As Shadow Minister for Planning, I will be advocating for greater community participation in land use planning decision-making processes. To this end, I'm a great supporter of the role of local government. I have 26 local governments in my region, and in my experience, they have always punched above their weight. I've experienced incredibly positive examples in local government in my region, and I've seen how they rise to the challenge when there's a gap, including through the COVID pandemic. At the state level, we can achieve so much in partnership, both with our local authorities and Commonwealth Government. But it is in this place that we review laws. And I will always reflect on whether those laws are the right instruments to deal with the problems that we have, whether they are less restrictive alternatives that we can achieve the same outcome. This approach was enshrined in Clause 5.9 of the Competition Principles Agreement, which was adopted as part of the competition reforms which I referred to earlier. Clause 5.9 was an incredibly effective tool. It was elegant, and I paraphrase it for the purpose of broader application here today. Firstly, in the review laws, you should always clarify the objectives of those laws. You should identify how those laws either restrict or empower, and analyse the likely effect of those laws on individuals, groups and the economy generally. You should assess the balance, the costs and benefits of those laws, both cultural, social and economic. And you should consider alternative means for achieving the same result, including non-legislative approaches. The discipline of this assessment should be applied before signing bills into law, taking seriously the role we have collectively in this House of Review. In closing, I'd like to acknowledge some key people which have influenced my life. They are the Honourable John Day. I had the pleasure to serve as his Chief of Staff after the win of the Barnett government in 2008. I hope I can follow in John's meticulous approach as the Shadow Minister for Planning, Lands and Heritage. My mentor and boss in the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Treasury, Dr. David Morrison, who I worked with on and off for nearly 2 decades. The Honourable Eric Ripper, who was Treasurer when I was Assistant Director for the Microeconomic Reform Unit in Treasury. Eric was always a great supporter and a model politician, someone who always read his briefings and provided feedback to the public service. I would like to give special thanks to Susan Chown, the immediate past President of the Durack Division of the Liberal Party, without whom I would not be here today. The Honourable Bill Marmion and his wife Caitlin, who supported me in my endeavours well before I entered in Parliament. The Honourable Melissa Price, MP, who I worked closely with in my role as the President of Durack Division of the Liberal Party. Melissa makes an incredible contribution to regional Western Australia. Senator Dean Smith, who works tirelessly as the patron senator to Durack and is always willing to do a road trip in the bush and meet people in small communities, towns and our regional cities. Councillor Jeff Harawa, Shire President of the Derby West Kimberley and also the former Liberal candidate for the Kimberley region. Jeff had the largest positive swing in his primary vote of any Liberal in the last election, and without his efforts I would not be here today. I also acknowledge the former member for Kalgoorlie, Kyron O'Donnell. Again, without his dedicated work, I would not be here as a member for Mining and Pastoral. And Elise McKeough, who ran as a candidate in North West Central. She fought adversity during the campaign, including floods, as she promoted the Liberal vision. The relentless Camilo Blanco for Port Hedland, who was passionate about his region, and he stood as a Liberal candidate in the last election for the Pilbara. I acknowledge today David Serafini from Derby, who's here today, and Jan Ford from Port Hedland, thank you, who made the long trip here. Thank you for your support. And to those watching the video feed, friends, colleagues and family around the state, the nation and the globe, thank you. To the Liberal Party, a truly grassroots organisation run by volunteers across the state, good people from a range of backgrounds, including small business, volunteer groups, religious, non-religious, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, men and women from different perspectives, but a common purpose outlined in the objectives of the party. And finally, I acknowledge my wife, Deborah. Her love and devotion, I hope I can match. We are a team in life. In closing, I'd like make a light reference to my mum, Joyce Thomson from New Zealand. She is in her twilight years and we converse regularly by phone. We continue to have that, continues to be that link to my past and the family across the sea. Recently, when I told Mum of the final count in Mining and Pastoral, and that took some time as you know, she was quick to provide me unsolicited advice. Don't be like those other politicians, Neil. Be honest and don't exaggerate. And then as an afterthought, she said, and most of all, love everybody. Now that seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? I spoke to her a few days ago and she reminded me in her slightly telling off tone, remember what I said? And I said, yes, Mum. And don't forget that word. I said, what word, Mum? Honourable. It's a good word and you shouldn't forget it. Yes, Mum, I won't forget. Thank you.